I'm really excited about today. I'm not actually preaching today. And I don't ever announce that in advance because people are weird and sometimes they're like, Pastor's not preaching, I'm not going to church today. So I didn't tell anybody that I wasn't preaching. But I get the privilege to introduce an incredibly great friend of mine. When I was in 2011, my wife and I moved from West Virginia to Kentucky and I took a position at a church that we were really excited about. And right after we moved, we started to get to know some of the families there. And there's just people in life that you got to click with. There's people in life you don't. And then there's people in life that you do. And for whatever reason, our family just clicked with the Conrad family. And they had 4 kids, and their lives were kind of wild and hectic, and our lives were kind of wild and hectic. We didn't have any kids yet, but we just liked them. And so we got to hanging out with them a ton. And then as a youth pastor, there are teenagers that you just click with. And then there are teenagers that you wish you could kick out of youth group, but it's youth group, so you can't. And I got to know the Conrad kids, the older Conrad kids really well. And eventually we gave them keys to our house and stuff, which turned out okay. In retrospect, that could have been a real problem. Except for the Christmas that they brought things from our house for our White Elephant gift exchange in youth group. Kids are unwrapping presents and we're like, that's our towel. The Conrads had let themselves in our house and stolen our things for the White Elephant gift exchange. One of the Conrads in particular, I got to be very, very close with. And I got to watch as she grew in her maturity, in her, and eventually into a call to ministry. And my friend Haley is now a youth pastor at a church of around 1,000 in Dayton. And we've stayed close over the years, and I love Haley with all of my heart. I am so honored that she's here today. It's going to be a real treat. So would you guys give a huge City North welcome to my friend Haley Conrad? One thing that I forgot to do, there's one thing that I forgot to do, and I knew I was going to forget this. Haley was so close with us that we have some pictures. That's Haley on her graduation with Brooklyn. When Brooklyn was, how old was Brooklyn at that point? 7 months, maybe? 7 months old.
Look how sweaty I was.
You were very sweaty. The field house isn't air conditioned, so you have an excuse. And then there's one more of our whole family with Haley that day, so...
Bald. All right.
And you were sweaty.
Shut up. All right. Cool. Hi, guys. Good to be here. Yeah, so I've known the Schultzes. Andrew was actually the first person that I told when I was like, hey, I'm feeling a call into ministry. He's like, let's do it. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't feel that same way quite yet, but we'll get there. And so it's really funny, so I knew Brooklyn for a while. For a long time, like a little piece of her life, she always called me Harry instead of Haley. And I was always a little bit offended, but it's fine. And so we're getting over it. And so I wanted to find a picture of Andrew and Vanessa, but the only one that I could find, but I couldn't get it in the computer, but I'll find it at some point probably. I'll post it on his Facebook wall. He'll love it. He's got like a Cheeto beard. It's like whipped cream and then just like threw Cheetos at his face. And so it was like really great. And so, but like he said, I am a youth pastor at a church in Dayton, Ohio. And so if I talk to you guys like you're teenagers, I'm so sorry. Usually I'm used to everyone like looking back at me and like wanting to pick their nose at the same time. And I say that like as a joke, but it actually has happened. There's like a kid in the front row who week after week is just like knuckle deep in his nose. And I'm like, hey man, good to see ya. And so afterwards we'll play a game of dodgeball in the parking lot, so I'll see you there. But anyway, I could stand up here and tell you like life story after life story, but you don't really want to hear that. Like, that's not what you're here for. So, and that would be absolutely terrible. So we're going to dive into some scripture right away. Are you guys cool with that? Perfect. You guys are like, for sure. All right, so we are going to look in John 15, 1 through 4 at first. John 15, 1 through 4. It starts like this. It says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so it'll be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. If you were counting, it says remain a bajillion times. And so any of you garden? Any of you gardeners? Some of you are like, like, not me. So I have like the special power where it's like, I can kill everything that I touch. It's really great. Like houseplant people, I don't understand because you guys are like amazing. Where it's like, everything is beautiful. It looks like we're like living in a forest. But no, there's no plants in my house. And so there's literally only one thing I've ever grown in my whole life. And I was like in 4th grade, and we had gotten watermelon at school. And for some reason, I don't know why, that particular time, I decided I wanted to take the watermelon seeds from the school lunch. Like, and Andrew said, I'm from Kentucky, so school lunch was not good. Like, it was like bad. We were barely wearing shoes. Like, they had to like make it. So we were barely wearing shoes. Like, we had to like make it so there was like puree because nobody had teeth. And so it was like, I'm just kidding. I'm so sorry. Anyway, and so I grabbed the watermelon seeds from the watermelon, and I took them and I planted them in my backyard. I didn't tell my mom, but that's what I did. And I forgot about it for months and months and months. And then the next thing I know, my mom goes, why is this massive vine growing on our back wall? And I'm like, couldn't tell you. I don't remember. And sure enough, a watermelon grew. That's the only thing I've ever grown in my whole life. And that story has little to do with nothing other than I'm impressed with myself. So, but anyway, so there's this passage, and if you are a gardener, you're like, no duh. And if you're not, you probably can catch along too. Where it's like, if the vine is connected to the branches, then the branches will grow fruit. If the branches are connected to the vine, then they will grow fruit. But there's this piece where if they're not connected to the vine, they're not going to grow anything. And you're like, no duh, Haley, that every branch that connected to the vine does nothing. Like, it's practically useless. But that every branch that is connected will bear fruit. And it even says it'll have to go through some pruning to even get better. He's saying that in this passage that he is the true vine, that Jesus is the true vine, and that we get to be the branches that are connected. That every branch that comes from him will contain fruit. And he makes this key statement in the verse 4 that's kind of been a life verse for me, of this idea of, hey, remain in me. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. By itself, it can bear nothing. And then it says it must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I love this verse because it like catches me up so many times. Any of you have a verse that you love because you're like, oh, that one really makes me knock down a notch. Where you're like, I thought I was here, like, oh, I got to go back down. Because there's a little piece, and it's a little bit funny. I feel like I can tell you anything because I don't actually work here. So you guys don't know the people that I know, so this really works out. Don't tell my people, and I won't tell your people. And so there's this piece where sometimes I try to create my own fruit. I try to create my own fruit in the things that like I do, which is really funny because I work in a church. And so there are times when I try to build things out of what I want without consulting God first. Almost as if, like, if I build it well enough, then he'll bless it. And he'll say, that was good, like, good job there, rather than starting with him as the source. Rather than starting with him as the true vine, I try to create things of my own accord and then say, maybe God will love this, instead of starting with him at the very beginning. And so there's like, this is the opposite of what he's saying to do. And I'm like, got it, cool, okay, for next time, I'll remember that. So let's keep going in John 5-8. It says, I am the vine and you are the branches. Just in case you didn't catch along, we get to be the branches. How exciting for us. And it says, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. So not only is Jesus the vine, but we are the branches. And it says that if you are a branch that is doing nothing, it says you're worthless, which is like, cool, thank you. I love that to know that I'm made for something, but according to this, if I don't do anything, I'm worthless. And it's like, cool, great. And so, but there's this part where if we're doing things that are outside of what God has called us to do, it's a little bit arbitrary. Like, it's a little bit of, we're trying to keep going and going. It's like running on a treadmill. You're not going anywhere. There's this piece where the fruit that we will create will not be from God. So it's like, what's the point? Any of you? So I grew up in Christian culture, which is a whole other issue. If you want to talk about it later, we'll talk about it. But they used to hand out these pencils in kids' church that had like a eraser on both ends. And it was like, life without Jesus is like this pencil. It has no point. It reminds me of that. And so it's like, have you ever had one of those? Ooh, you really need one. I'll find some. I'll give them to you later. And so there's this part where it's like, there's no point to it. It feels arbitrary. In college, we used to go on these mission trips, and we would go, and they were great. They were fantastic. And so there was once that we went, and they had this giant pile of mulch on one side of the parking lot. And you're like, okay, what are we going to have to do with that giant pile of mulch? And turns out that we were going to fill up a pickup truck and some wheelbarrows. We were going to move it from this side of the parking lot all the way over to this side. And it was a big parking lot. And so we were like, we're starting the day. We're like, okay, we can do it. And so by the end of it, we're like sweaty, disgusting, muddy, like our arms are tired. We like can't lift them higher than this. We're like, we did so good. We crushed it. Like the fruits of what we did, like that's got to be a big deal. Like we helped them out so much. And we felt so good about what we had done. And then I had a friend who went on the trip next week, and it turns out, like, we were talking about some of the experiences we had, some of the things that they did, and it turns out they were like, yeah, we moved this massive pile of mulch. And I was like, wait, we did that too. And it turns out that they had moved that same pile of mulch from this side of the parking lot to this side of the parking lot the whole day. Like, my arms were still hurting, and I almost wanted to call and be like, really, why? Like, why would you do this to me? And so there are times where when we're not connected to the vine, our resources and our abilities feel arbitrary. Like we're not actually doing anything. It's like running on a treadmill. You're not going anywhere. And it feels like I am just stuck in this rut, in this routine. And that's what Jesus is saying here. He's saying that if you want to do something that really matters, stay connected to me. Stay connected to the vine. You want your efforts to actually mean something. You want to bear fruit that makes a difference. Stay with me. He uses this word remain, which is kind of a funny word. He uses this word remain. And in old translations, it says to abide, which is an even funnier word. Like, I'm going to abide with Jesus. If you said that like out in the street, people would be like, cool. That's good for you. And so, sorry. So it says remain and to abide. But it's this really cool idea. It's like Jesus had this way of drawing people in, of keeping people close to him. When he called his disciples, he uses the phrase, come and follow me. Come and see what I can do. Come and see what your life could look like if you stick by my side. Come and see what peace I can give. Come and see what joy I have for you. Come be a part of what is going on in my world. And so it's this idea of like, come and remain. Come be a part of what I am doing. Rest in the fact that I know you and I care for you. So it sounds beautiful, right? You're like, oh, I love every second of that. Because it's this piece where sometimes we don't feel that here. And every part of me wants to find a place where I can just remain, where I can abide, where I can feel like I am a significant piece of the puzzle. And Jesus says, come here, come be with me. Come abide, come remain with me. And there's this part where it sounds beautiful, right? You're like, it's so deeply poetic. There's a part of me when things sound too good, I'm like, I don't know. Well, like, okay. Like if you go around and say that to other people, you're like, I'm choosing to remain with Jesus always. People will be like, that's really cool. I don't know how to respond to that. And so, and there's this piece where it's like, I can say that. Like I can say, I really, really want this. I really, really want to remain with Jesus. I really, really want that feeling of being known, of feeling like I have a place, like I have a purpose and I have a meaning. And it's like, I want that. And it's so easy in those moments to like half buy into the idea and then to like make blanket statements and then like nothing happens. I could say that because I don't like work here, so that's fine. And so there's these parts of you come here on a Sunday morning, and I know this because I do this at times, where you come here on a Sunday morning, you hear from God in a different way than you did throughout the rest of the week, and you hear from him. Being with the people of God, being up here singing and worship songs, hearing from someone speak, you feel God's presence. And then it's hard when we go back out and like life gets busy, right? You're like, after you leave church on a Sunday, you're like, well, then I have lunch, then I have my nap that I have to have. And then it's like, then I have to focus it on Mondays tomorrow. And so then by then you forget that these were the things that I knew that I needed to work on. Like I know that I wanted to be a part of this. And I know I wanted to grow in my faith and take these steps this week. And before you know it, you've forgotten. Like, and I say that because I do that. Like that's kind of what I do as well. Not to say that there's not a piece where we make those life steps happen, but there's so many times where we like the idea of it without actually implementing it. We like the idea of being a part and remaining with God rather than actually taking those life steps. We get caught up in like a bajillion other things. Like it's so easy for me to say in those moments that I know that I need to take these life steps to get closer to Jesus. Like whether he said something to me in that service that I know I need to be a part of, and then it's so hard for me to actually take that step. I don't know if any of you have ever been through a phase. Well, like I'm 25 right now. So like right now, like money's not like pouring in, you know? And so there's a piece where it's like, if you asked me, I'd be like, I'm trying to save money. Like I'm really trying to work on that. But if any of you asked me to like go to dinner somewhere really nice, I'd be like, yeah, where are we going? Like, I'm like, let's do it. I'm like, I want steak. That's what I want. And so it's like, I could say all day that it's like, oh, I need to save money. But then I get to that point and I'm like, I really don't want to do that. And so there's this piece. And so there's like that piece of, on Sunday mornings, sometimes we do the same thing. We leave knowing what we need to do, and then we forget what steps we actually need to take. And so we end up not making as many of those life changes that we need to. Not all the time, but definitely some of the time. You guys with me? Is that okay? Like, I don't want it to be like, oh, Haley, like, you're here for the first time, and you're telling me that I'm, like, distracted and lazy. Like, I'm sorry, that's not what I'm saying. Like, you just met me, but here's the deal, is that we often get distracted. We often get distracted from everything else that is going on in the world. There's so many things, like I can say that and I don't have kids or I'm not even married, and sometimes I feel like I'm like, how am I supposed to do all these things? Like I don't imagine how any of you guys do it. Like you guys are superheroes to me. And so, but we get caught up in a bajillion other things. And so we get distracted and we feel like life is pulling us every single which way. Have any of you ever walked into like a room of your house and realized, I can't remember why I came into this room? And so you're like, what? And so you just stand there at the doorway, just trying to think through where your mind's been, and you have to like go through like 40 different things to figure it out. You're like, oh, I have a lot going on right now. And so some of you, during all of this COVID season, when we've been quarantining, I remember those first like 2 months when we couldn't tell, like, is this a flesh-eating disease? Like, what's happening? Like, what is COVID? But it was like those 2 months where everyone was like locked in their house. They're like, okay, we're going to brave it. We're going to go to the grocery store, okay? It was like a huge deal. And so, but like those 2 months, the amount of people that like were redecorating their house because they were like, we've had that green sofa for 7 years and I have said that I am tired of it. Like, you can't get distracted in those moments when it was all that you saw. So it was like everyone's houses looked different after COVID. You should just go around on a house tour and just see what it looks like. And so there's this piece where we couldn't get as distracted because it was right in front of us. It was right in front of us, that ugly green sofa. That's my example. I had an ugly green sofa. I had to get rid of it. It was gone. And so that was like sitting right in front of you that you like couldn't distract yourself from anymore. You just knew it had to be gone. And so in those moments when we read passages like this, when Jesus tells us to remain, it's really hard because we forget until next week, and we forget to work in our faith. We forget what it looks like and that feeling that we long for of remaining with God, of knowing that He's here and I want to be a part of what He is doing. And so, like I said, I don't want to be giving you like a guilt trip. Like there's a piece where it's like, you just met me, I'm so sorry. Like, but I feel like there's this piece of our faith that cannot be neglected. Like there's this piece of our faith when God says, you have to remain in me, that sometimes we have to make that step to do that. And so I really only know from my own experience the times that I've not done this well. Like I only know from my own experience the times that I've gotten so distracted, so thrown off by everything else around me that I forget where God is actually calling me. And it isn't in these moments that we like disobey God. It isn't in those moments where we like drastically turn away from like one Sunday to the next. You're like, nope, I refuse now. But we just take our eyes off of Him. There are times when we just place our faith on the back burner because we have so much going on. And so we don't choose to remain or abide with Him. And in those moments, our eyes wander. There's that piece of when Jesus says, come and follow me. He says, keep your eyes up here. Keep your eyes with me. Remain with me. Keep your eyes up here. And so our eyes sometimes have the tendency to wander. I know from my experience of working with teens, not your guys' teens, my teens. My teens are terrible. You guys are great. And so, but there's this piece of when there's this one, like I said, you guys don't know him, so it's really great right now. There's this one kid who Andrew said that sometimes you just want to kick him out of youth group. Like sometimes they're just like, why did you do that? Like why? We have these like letters that we have on the stage of our youth group stage, and he just like would throw a ball at them, and they would like be breaking, and I was like, what are you doing? I'm like, why? And he goes, I don't know. I'm like, get out. And so we have one of those kids. And in those moments where I feel like I have to be like a little bit of a disciplinarian, just like a little bit because I'm not their parents, I have to do that thing where I'm like, hey, look here, look in my eyes, look and see. I'm not joking. Stop it. Like, stop doing this. But it's like I have to catch their eyes or they didn't hear a word that I said. It's like, if I don't look exactly at what look at their eyes, they're not going to catch a word that I said. And for those of you that are parents, I bet you understand that better than I do. I just have teens that I hang out with on Wednesdays sometimes, so you guys that are parents really understand. And so there's this piece where our eyes wander. And when they wander, we don't stay focused on what we're supposed to. Our eyes get trapped looking at everything every which way. And in those moments when our eyes start to wander, I just want to talk about the first thing that happens, like the first clue that comes in that you realize, oh, like my faith has not been like first priority in my life. Like the first sign of what that looks like. And when our eyes start to wander, we start to notice what everybody else has. What everybody else has going on, the gifts that they have been given. I have a full list, like the things that they own, the house that they have, like the car that they drive, like the nice, perfect family they have. It's been really funny during COVID when people post everything to be like, they look so happy. Like, look at that. They're on their third vacation this week, it feels like. And it's like, they're just perfect. It's fine. And so that's kind of the first thing that happens when our eyes start to wander, is we start noticing the things that other people have, the experiences that they have. And it's not even that we notice what they've got going on. We notice how different it is from what we have going on. And it's like that idea of, if you had a Tesla, I'm sorry if you do have a Tesla, like, can I take it for a ride? We'll see. All right, but if you have a Tesla and your like buddy gets a Tesla too, you're like, oh, cool, like, welcome to the club. But if you look in the parking lot, I've got a like banged up Chevy Malibu right now. And so, but if like you have my banged up Chevy Malibu and then my friend gets a Tesla, I'm like, what are they trying to prove? Like, what are they, like, what's that about? Like, okay. But there's a piece where it's like, it's fine if they are doing well, but if they're doing better than me, that's when I'm like, nope, not okay. And so we're so happy with the things that we have until we look around and notice what everybody else has going on, right? Anybody else with me? You're like, you don't have to nod your head, but I get you. And so we're always so happy with the things that we have until we look around. They did this experiment with capuchin monkeys, which, have any of you seen Friends? The monkey that he has in that one's a capuchin monkey. What's its name? Marcel? Okay, cool. Because I was like trying to think of it, and I was like, it's not coming to me. I was thinking of like Marcus and all these other things. Anyway, Marcel. So they did this experiment with a couple of capuchin monkeys, and they had them perform like a trick or something in their cage, and they gave the first one a cucumber. And he was like so excited. He was like, haha, got a cucumber. And then the second one in the second cage, he did a trick or something, and they gave him a grape. And which, if you don't know, according to capuchin monkeys, sorry, tongue twister, grapes are better than cucumbers. And also in regular life, grapes are better than cucumbers. And so the first monkey, he does the trick again because he goes, that one got a grape. I need a grape. And so he does it again, and they give him a cucumber again. And so he's like, he loses his mind. He like starts shaking the cage. He like grabs the cucumber and like chucks it at the person, which is really great. And so, but there's this funny piece where before he knew what the other prize was, he was super excited about his cucumber. He was super excited about what he had been given. And then he realized there was a grape in the story that I wasn't getting, and he was furious. And so here's the idea, is that when we take our eyes off of God, we notice the things that other people have going on. That's kind of the first sign that we know that our God has not been our top priority, that our eyes have wandered away from him. And so in this, we can say that God says that all we need is him. He says, all that you need is me. Stay with me, remain with me. But the rest of the world will always tell us that all you need is whatever that other person has, and probably even better than what they have. And so the important thing is what they have versus what I have. And so sometimes we get caught up so much in that spiral of what that looks like, of trying to figure out, how can I do this? How can I become better? How can I do this? And there's this piece that we cannot neglect, that abiding and comparing cannot coexist together. Abiding in God and comparing ourselves to others cannot coexist together. They don't fit together because our eyes are on two different spots. Our eyes are either on God or our eyes are on our neighbor's Tesla. And so we become distracted when our eyes aren't always on God. There's a story in the Old Testament about King David. And King David, he's the the David and Goliath guy. He like defeated a giant, which is super cool. Lived a very interesting life. And so he's gone through all these times when he's just been incredibly faithful to God. And there's this start of this moment where he just like starts this kind of like downfall. And we're going to dive a little bit into that. And so King David finds himself, he's at home on his roof, and he sees a woman bathing. casual, weird, who knows? And so that's how the story starts, which is like, that's probably not a good way to start a story. And so he calls for her, and they did something that we usually skip over in youth ministry. And so any of you, sorry, I'm not talking about it. I'm just going to leave it there. Any of you, so like I said, I grew up in Christian culture. Any of you ever grow up watching VeggieTales? VeggieTales? Okay, just think, yeah, back there. They said, me. All right, so just think like Bible stories mixed with vegetables, like all your favorite things just into one. And so there's this piece where King David in the VeggieTales story steals a rubber ducky from this other guy, and it's like, oh, that's not what actually happened, but that's what we're going to stick with today. So so he steals this guy's rubber ducky, and the rubber ducky becomes pregnant, and he and then King David kills her husband, the rubber ducky's husband. Anyway, and so yada yada. So, but at the very beginning of this verse is something that I want to come back to, because there's a piece where it's like, how in the world, like King David that had done all these amazing things. Sorry, I'm going to lose it if I don't put that right there. All right, and so how he'd done all these amazing things. How did he fall victim to this? How did his eyes wander so far away? And it says this in 1. You don't have it, but I'm going to read it to you. Just get ready. It says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. Sure. But David remained in Jerusalem. And we usually skip over that part because the next part talks all about rubber duckies, and we usually catch on to that one. And so, but there's this part where it says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent someone else. It says, at the time when kings usually go off to war, David decided to stay. That in this moment when it's like, this is what usually happens, David decided to stay. And so he got distracted. He lost purpose in this moment. He lost the goal and the vision of what he was supposed to do as a king. And then lots of nonsense happened that we're not getting into. And so with losing focus, he lost his sights on God. He lost his sights on the life that God had told him to live. And here's the deal, is that we cannot afford to lose our focus. We cannot afford to lose our focus because the call that God has given us is so much higher than anything else. The call that God has given us is so much bigger than any ways that our eyes can wander. And there's a life of comparison that waits on this end, and there's a life of remaining in God that waits on this end. And the life that's full of comparison has no joy, has no life to it. But this life with God has so much freedom and love just waiting for you. And so we're going to keep going in John. It says in, maybe, turn it to Matthew. There we go. All right, John 15:9. And it says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. So he's basically saying, I have loved you, now remain in my love. Which at this point, if you're not like, cool, I've heard you say that 1,000 times, how do I do that? Then like, keep with me, we got it. So you're like, Haley, how in the world? You've said that. And so there's this piece where he goes, keep my commands. Keep the things that I've told you to do. Which if you are a parent, you're like, yes, kids, keep my commands, then I will love you more. Maybe. All right, so not a parent, I don't know how it works. And so, anyway, verse 11, it says, I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Like he says, this is a joy issue. Like this is a joy issue. If you choose to stay over here, there's not much joy for you. If you choose to come and remain with me, there is a life of joy awaiting you. This is a joy issue. And then it says this, my command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit. Fruit that will last, and so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command. Love each other. Love each other. He says, this is how you remain with me. Live your life in a way that you love people so much that you would lay down your life for them. Maybe not literally, but maybe. And so there's this piece where we read through this passage where it says, this is how you love people well. You lay down your life for them. And Easter is next week. And there's this piece where Jesus goes through and he goes, this is how you love people well, as I am about to do. You love your friends to all the capabilities that you have, enough to even lay down your life for them. And literally next week, we celebrate the way that God laid down his life for us. He says that you lay down your life for your friends, as I am about to do. As I am about to do, we find ourselves in this moment kind of caught in this crossfire of the fact that Jesus is telling us, I'm going to do this for you. Like, there's no reason for you to try and earn this. Like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, I love you so much that I'm going to give my life for you. He says that there's no greater love than this, the love that I'm about to bestow upon you. That there's no greater love than what I'm about to give you. And it says in this that if you love each other to the point that sometimes it's not even going to be fun for you. Like, it's not even going to be fun, but you have to love people to the fullest extent of who you are. He says, this is how you remain with me. Love each other even when you don't want to. Like, even when it hurts, even when you feel like that is the last thing I want to do. Those people that sometimes you just want to ignore and push to the side, he says, love them with all that you have. Love everyone with all that you have. Sometimes this deals with loving people with money. Sometimes it deals with time or with energy or putting your efforts into something that it's so easy to push to the side, so easy to ignore. So what does it look like for you guys to love people well? What does it look like for you guys to fully give yourself up to the fact that I need to love people to the fullest extent? He says, love with all that you have. And with that as your goal, your eyes can't wander. With love as your core, with love as your final goal, your eyes cannot wander. Because your eyes are fully stuck on God. Because with love at the core, at the full identity of who you are, then your eyes can't wander. They stay stuck on Jesus. Because you are connected to the vine. And there's this piece where it goes on in John, and the next couple of verses, it says, Jesus warns about the world's hatred. We're just like, great. Because there's this piece where loving people to your fullest extent is not easy. And it goes so opposite what everybody else is going to tell you to do. It goes so fully opposite what everybody else is going to do. And so he says, hey, living this way, people might hate you even. Because there's this piece where when we live our life full of love, that we allow others to confront the core that's in them. Like, if our core is love and we love everybody to the fullest extent that we can, and people realize that that's what you're doing, they have to recognize the core that they have within them. The core of like neglect and trauma and hurt and pain that they have within them. And so it allows you to be a light even in the darkest of circumstances. But he says it's not going to be easy. But he says that you don't do it alone because you are connected to the vine. You are connected to the vine. My mom always did this thing growing up where what I always thought was ridiculous, but every time there was someone who, she's a really nice lady, okay, I'm just going to say that. You don't know her, but she's really great. And so every time she would have any kind of a frustration or difficulty with someone, she always said she's going to kill him with kindness. Kill him with kindness, because in those moments, it's so easy to push them to the side. To realize that it's like, maybe if I don't deal with that issue, maybe it'll all be okay, and we can just like brush past it, and maybe it'll all be like fine at the end of the day. But she always chose to fully like come into and recognize, hey, I'm going to love that person to the fullest of my extent because I don't want to, because that is not what I want to do. Because every part of me is telling me to run away when they come close. She says, I'm going to choose to love them with all that I have. And it's always annoying like when I was a kid, because I was like, why do you do that to people? They don't like you. And it was like, because it was always awkward, because it was like, you could tell they didn't want it. But she was like, come on, like, how are you doing? And I'm like, stop it, Tammy. And so, because here's the deal, because it raises their own heart issue to the surface. It raises, oh, I have a problem with her, but she doesn't seem to have a problem with me. And it allows them the chance to confront what's going on within them as well. And so here's the deal, is that it's not going to be easy, but you're not going to do it alone. Because with your focus solely on God, when he's looking at you and he says, hey, eyes up here, keep focused on me, and you're able to, you'll see the world so much differently. You will see the pain that people have rather than the ways that they've mistreated you. You will see the ways of why they've lashed out rather than just seeing the hurt that they've caused along the way. You'll be able to recognize the ways that you can love people with empathy rather than just neglecting them and pushing them aside. Because there's so much of the world that needs to be seen this way. Because there's so much hurt and there's so much brokenness that could be here that we need to see with a loving eye. because God has called us to see people in this way. He says, you want to remain with me, you want to stay with me, love my people well. He says, love my people well. So at the end of the day, what I want everyone to walk out of here knowing is that I want you to make God the core of who you are. Make him the very center of everything you do. Make love your core. Choose to act out of love before you do anything else. Love people even when you really, really, really don't want to. Love people with all that you have. Make love the epitome of who you are. And with that as your bullseye, like your eyes can't wander. With love as your win always, your eyes can't wander because they're so focused on Jesus. You're so focused on God that you cannot allow your eyes to wander because love is who you are. Because with love as your target, you cannot get distracted. We can't afford to, because the life that God has called us to is so much bigger. I'm going to pray for us. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for the fact that you are here, that you are moving, that you love us so much that we can't even explain it. That you've told us that we can remain with you, that we can live a life that is full with you, that we can live a life that has you at its center. Please help us to know what that looks like for us this week. Put those people into our mind that we know that we need to love better, that we know that we need to be in their lives, that we need to call them to see that sometimes even the brokenness that's inside them. Help us to love you to the fullest of our extent this week and forevermore. Dear God, we hope that we can give everything up to you, that we can fully surrender all that we have. And all these things we pray. Amen.
Amen. I don't need that. Thank you, though.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, will you guys give it up for Haley? That was a great message, Haley. I don't know if you remember. I think I've told you this story before and asked if you remembered, and you didn't. But I forget everything, so I forgot if I did or didn't, and I made that whole thing up in my head. There was a period of time where Haley was probably a junior in high school at this point, and we got to know each other pretty well. And there was a Sunday morning where she was helping back in Kid XP, and I was playing in the band that morning, and we crossed each other in this hallway. And I asked her, I said, "Hey, how you doing today?" And she lied straight to my face, right? It was like, "I'm good." Really obvious, you know. And we just hadn't got there in our relationship yet where she was honest with me about things. And I kind of took a few more steps, and I turned around and I said, "Hey," and there wasn't anybody else in the hall, and I said, "Hey," and she turned around and looked at me, and I said, you don't have to tell me what's going on, but you're not going to lie to me. And she kind of went, "Okay." Man, the whole time you were talking, it just reminded me that, like, it's loving people. It's just all about caring about people where they are, and thank you. Thank you. I love you. So today we're going to get ready to finish up. Make sure that today you just say a big thank you to Haley when we're finished up. It was really it was an honor for me to get to. I don't think I've ever heard you speak. I've listened to you online, but I don't think I've ever heard you. That was awesome. So make sure you say a big thank you to Haley. A couple quick reminders before we head out. The first is, again, next Sunday is Easter Sunday. So please make sure to grab Easter invites. Listen, if you don't know what to do with those, like, here's a couple ideas. Nick gave you a couple. Like, give them to strangers. Great. Don't throw them at strangers. The corners are kind of sharp. And if it may not be great. That's not the impression we want to leave. Hey, City North, they cut me. A great idea, if you're up for this sort of thing, is take a couple of those cards and at some point in the next week, go through a drive-through at McDonald's, at Starbucks, at whatever, and pay for the people's meal behind you. When you do that, verify that it's not a minivan or a Chevy Tahoe. Single person in a car, great. Offer to pay for, unless you're all about that. I'm going to pay for 14 children. Because, man, McDonald's is not cheap anymore, Anyway, offer to pay for the people behind you. Leave the invite card and be like, "Hey, we paid for them. Will you just give them the car?" Do that kind of thing. Just do something kind. Do something loving. Do something out of the ordinary for the people around you. Take a card, give it to them, and just tell them God loves them. That's it. So, guys, thank you so much for being here today. Again, grab cards. Go to softball at City North Church if you're interested in playing softball this summer. Be blessed. Have a great week, and we'll see you back next Sunday for Easter. All right, have a great week, guys.